Hello, welcome to Module 3. We are moving along rapidly in the course, and you've made a lot of progress in the first 2 weeks, and now we're ready to begin the next step in the overall writing and researching process. So as usual, you need to read the learning objectives and the module overview as you begin the week. Hopefully you're getting in the habit of doing this fairly early in the week, as well as looking at the announcement early in the week so you know what's up ahead for the entire module. First of all, what you will learn about in Module 3, how to revise your topic as your research progresses, how to describe a source, and how to identify the connection between your sources and your topic. And then secondly, why you will learn about it. This is important to know beyond just, okay, this is what we're going to cover this week, but why is this important to learn about? First of all, to practice revising your research process and narrow your focus so that you learn and practice that skill, not only for the project we're going to do in this course, but for future projects as well and other courses. Secondly, to learn how to describe a source related to your topic. So understanding how you can communicate to a reader or an audience a description of your source and how it relates to your topic. That's important to do for a number of reasons. First of all, to indicate that you've actually read it, but also to share information with a potential reader or audience. And then finally, to identify the relevancy and credibility of your sources to provide supporting evidence for your topic. It's important that you be able to evaluate your sources in terms of both credibility and their relevance to the particular project that you're doing. And we'll discover more about that as we work through the assignment this week. And then finally, there's always tips for success, suggestions for how you can be sure that you're being the most efficient, effective student that you can be, and followed by the module at a glance, which again is the step-by-step process through the module so that you're ensured that you're doing everything. Then we move on to the Module 3 guide. And whereas the introductory material gives you general information, the guides always give you more specific information. And this week, the focus is on collecting sources and revising research questions. While you won't actually be revising your research question beyond the revisions that you have made to your initial research question from last week, that's actually not part of the assignment this week. But you need to start thinking about that this is a continuing to evolve process, that just because you pick a research question to start out, that may change with the needs of the research, with the needs of your audience, with the needs for your focus. So where do we begin? The first thing we're doing is in this process is to do a collection of sources. And that will be the only assignment that's due this week. It's 3-1 collection of sources. Sometimes that's also known as an annotated bibliography. And what this does is allow you to have an opportunity to both assess your sources for things like credibility and relevance, as well as to summarize your source, which is an opportunity for you to check and see how well you have comprehended the content of the source. The purpose of research and of revising the research question is, again, this whole thing about evolution. So far, we've just written drafts. Drafts are first attempts. They're meant to be changed. They're meant to be made different depending on the need of the audience, depending on your purpose, the stage of the writing process that you're in. And so one of the things that you'll be doing is thinking about answering the research question. That's what your essay is actually going to contain, is the answer to your research question. And so we're going to start thinking in the direction of what might that possibly be. This is a persuasive essay, so I'm going to need to be able to pick a position, take a side, for instance, and then support that position in the essay through my own reasoning as well as supporting credible research. Diverse perspectives in your research question. We've already looked at diverse perspectives in the Module 2 discussion, so you've had some opportunity to think about diverse perspectives and how they affect an argument, especially in trying to develop a strong and credible argument. And there's some comments here about the use of AI in diverse perspectives in your research questions. So this is kind of an interesting one to read as we continue to consider how AI affects the writing process. And of course, the next page is the required resources page where readings are listed. I wanted to spend a little bit of time going over the readings in a little bit more detail this time because the readings this time not only apply specifically to our assignment for this week, 3-1, collection of sources, but they're also resources for future work that you may be doing. And so keep in mind that some of these things will not apply directly to our assignment for this module, but they will be important for you to have knowledge of as you continue on towards your education goals. So first of all, Chapter 14 is focused on annotated bibliographies. Again, that's just another name for a collection of sources. But you're more likely to find that term being used, annotated bibliography, in other classes rather than the collection of sources. So this first page talks about summarizing and assessing sources in general. For instance, how to start, need to write a summary, and it gives you a link to Chapter 47 for more details about writing a summary. But basically what you need to know is that for academic projects like this one, you need to keep track of all your sources from day one. So you need to get in the habit of somehow, whether you put it in a spreadsheet, a Word document, write it down in a notebook or on 3x5 cards, you need to keep track of everything to do with your sources. You need to know the APA citation information. You need to know what the main point and supporting points are for the particular source. You also need to write down any quotes or paraphrases that might be important to supporting your argument. The second reading is understanding annotated bibliographies. And this one is more important to bibliographies overall and how you might use them not only for this class but for the future. So again, it's important reading, but keep in mind that it may not be directly relevant to our assignment. Things like following a single documentation style, well, you have to do that in APA for the requirements of this course, but in future courses that may not be the case. And so there's a list here of the different disciplines in which writing or citation style they're most likely to include. There's also information about recording complete information. As I said previously, it's important that you get in the habit as soon as you start to look at a source, writing down all these things, because you are going to need them to create a collection of sources or an annotated bibliography. There's also some information about summarizing the content of each source, as well as some general information about assessing the quality of each source, and that will be part of what you'll be doing with your collection of sources assignment this time. The next two hot links, getting the details right, annotated bibliographies, and examining a model annotated bibliography, those are important to look at, but keep in mind that these do not directly show what you'll be doing for assignment 3-1. There's a specific format and content that we'll be requiring for that assignment. So keep that in mind. Do take a look at those, but remember that they're not going to directly connect to the assignment. As always, you should be able to answer the questions that are the bullet point questions after you've done the reading. It's a good way to check comprehension. The next reading, Chapter 24, talks about thesis statements. And again, we're not going to be writing a thesis statement this week, but we will in a future module. So this is kind of preparing you for things that are coming up. Thesis statements may or may not be something that you are familiar with, depending on when was the last time you wrote an essay. This is a good review for some and maybe new information for others. And again, we will not be writing a thesis statement as part of assignment 3-1. The next reading, Chapter 47, is titled Summarizing Sources. And this one is actually going to directly connect to the assignment, because part of what 3-1 asks you to do is to summarize each of the three sources that you'll be using. So this is general information about preparing a summary for every item you examine. Again, you should get in the habit of doing that as soon as you start to read. You're collecting citation information, and then you're also going to be making notes of the main points and any points that are supporting, as well as any potential quotes or paraphrases that you might use. This tells you a little bit about why it's important to do a summary, because you're recapping what the writer said. You're not repeating or quoting necessarily in your summary. The summary should be entirely in your own words, but it indicates that you do understand what you've read, and being able to boil that down into the main point and supporting points. Also be sure that your summary is accurate and complete. You need to make sure that someone reading your summary would be able to go to that same article, make a comparison, and see that your information from that summary is accurate and complete. Also, you can use a summary to record your take on a stance. We're going to be writing a persuasive essay where you are going to be presenting an argument. And so sometimes students will include in their summary their stance on the issue. This particular assignment 3-1 will not have you necessarily doing that, but sometimes you'll be doing that as part of an assignment preparing your annotated bibliography. Then we have additional support. Again, it's called optional, but actually this time you need the library resource, the APA style basics, because one of the things that you're going to be asked to do in 3-1 collection of sources is to create a complete and as correct as you can get it APA style reference citation. And so this page will give you information about what that needs to include. So if you click on Elements of APA References List, that will give you examples of the kinds of listings that you may need to have, whether it's a single author, two authors, etc. So let's take a quick look at the single author one. Include the author's last name and initials, add space between. Then as you scroll down the page, it will give you information on how to format dates, retrieval dates, the titles of the work, source information, how you list it when you're trying to create a complete listing, which is what you'll be asked to do for assignment 3-1. These are great because they provide examples. This is a good page to bookmark because it has all the information that you're going to use not only for this assignment, but for our project, as well as work that you may be doing in future courses where you're using APA style. The second additional support optional listing is a library resource. What is an annotated bibliography and how do I write one? This one would be more useful for a class that's using the more standard annotated bibliography, whereas since we're doing a collection of sources that is an adapted form of an annotated bibliography, this one won't be as relevant, but it might be helpful for you to take a quick look at it and bookmark it in case you need to use it in the future for an annotated bibliography. And now we get to the assignment, the single assignment that is due in Module 3. It's Project Draft Part 1, Collection of Sources, and as always we need to click on Guidelines and Rubric to get the assignment specifics. And we're going to be using two things. We're going to look at the instructions as they are given within the module online, and then I'm going to also make you aware of a template that you can use and that I would like you to use. I strongly encourage you to use that's included in the Module 3 announcement. So first of all, let's take a look at what's here in the online materials. The overview notes that the research process is an important part of writing a persuasive essay. In this assignment, you will create a collection of sources or an annotated bibliography. That's the other name for it. Note, this assignment is the first part of the project you will submit in Module 7. A crucial part of the research process is identifying credible and relevant sources that support your topic and argument. Your sources should support your topic and argument, identify counter-arguments, and represent diverse perspectives. You should also note that part of what you're going to be doing in Module 7 when you do the final project is you're going to be revising 3-1, the original collection of sources. So I'll be giving you feedback to help you with doing that revision process. The writing process is always circling around. It's not a linear process. We're often moving backwards, redoing something, adding more information, changing information before we move forward. And so this is part of that overall writing process where we do an original collection of sources that's really a draft that will be revised then in Module 7 for the final project. So here we have specific directions, and you're going to evaluate 3 sources that you selected in modules 1 and 2 that support your topic. One of these sources should be the original article that you selected in module 1 from the process resources document. The other two sources should be the ones that you selected during your library research in module 2. So you've already done the research that's needed because you only have to have 3 sources for this assignment. 1 from project resources, 2 for module 2 that you gave us links to in the discussion in module 2. Okay, so here's where we're going to pause and take a look at the module 3 announcement. I've scrolled down to the part that talks about the assignment for this week, 3-1, Project Draft Part 1, Collection of Sources. After you finish reading all the required resources, then you will do this assignment. Here is an example of what should be included in your submission and how it should be organized. Please, please, please use it. It can be copied and pasted into a Word document to be used as a template for the assignment submission. Using this format makes it so much easier for you to be able to be sure that you're including everything that's asked for, organizing it in such a way that it makes it easy for me, the instructor, to tell what you're presenting, making it easier for me to grade, which I really, really appreciate. It also makes it faster for me to grade, which is important because I want to spend as much time as I can giving you information, suggestions for revision for the final project. So I want to walk through this template in some detail, again, so that you'll be really clear on what it is you're being asked to do and what format it should be submitted in. Again, you can copy and paste all of the things that are gray highlighted into a Word document and then just replace the information in gray with your responses. So number 1, current research question, which may be revised from the research question that you've most recently used. The assignment instructions don't ask for this, but the information is needed for your instructor to determine the relevancy of the sources you present. So it's very, very important that you include your current research question. Number 2, biased sources. Be sure to examine the biases found in your sources rather than the general impact of using biased sources. In other words, A, how does the presence of bias in each source impact your argument? In this case, the word impact could also mean shape or effect. And it not only gives you exactly what the focus of the response should be, it also gives you a length suggestion, 3 to 4 sentences. Then, moving on to number 3, diverse perspectives. Again, we are looking for the perspectives found in your sources, not the general idea of diverse perspectives. 2 to 3 sentences each. A, how do multiple voices in these sources, the ones that you're using, give evidence for your argument? And B, how do the diverse perspectives in these sources from your research support your topic? Number 4, support. The first source is the one chosen from the project resources in Module 1. You may use the 2 library sources for Module 2 or swap them out for another library source you feel will better help you answer your current research question. You cannot change the original article selected in Module 1. You have to stick with that one. So that means that you're going to have an entry for each of the 3 sources, and each of those entries needs to include the following. A, project resources APA citation. So you need to have a complete APA citation. That's where that link under the optional resources will come in handy, so you'll know how to do that. Start off that entry for that source, the project resources source, with the APA citation. Follow that, and ideally, each of these will have a paragraph, so they're not all run together. It's important that each source has its own paragraph for sure, but it's helpful to me and to you thinking about organization when you're communicating to any audience, thinking about making each one of these a paragraph of its own. So for summary, 2 to 3 sentences, make that a single paragraph. 2, why is this source credible? 2 to 3 sentences. Again, it could be its own paragraph. You need to be sure that you include all the information below for a full assessment of credibility. Currency, how recent is the information? It should be no more than 5 years old to be considered recent and accurate for the internet age. Second, authority. Who is the source of the information? What makes that source credible? Why is their writing that or they're producing this source make it credible? Third, accuracy. Is the content reliable and correct? Don't just say yes or no. How do you know that it is? Where's the proof? Where's the proof that it's reliable? Where's the proof that it's correct? You need to point that out. And then purpose. Why does this information exist? Why did they publish this article? What was the motivation behind publishing this particular article? All of these things add up to help you decide whether or not this is a credible article, that it can stand up to scrutiny in an argument. Then third, and again this could be its own separate paragraph, how is this source relevant to your research question? 1 to 2 sentences. So what it needs to show is that you're starting to think about, how am I going to use this source to support my argument? What does it say in terms of something that's relevant to my research question's answer? How does it connect to a potential thesis statement? How are you going to use this so that your response shows that you're starting to think about how that is going to connect? Then we just repeat that 2 more times. B is going to be the first library source. And then again, you're using this as a template, so it's got all the information that you need. And then C will be library source number 2, beginning with the APA citation, summary, credibility, and then relevance. What is shown in the template in the announcement is the same information that's listed here. It's just been put into a format that makes better sense, as well as organizes it more easily for your purpose. We want to keep it simple as much as possible, and so this template allows us to simplify this information and organize it in a way that makes more sense. Always be looking at what to submit. Your submission should be a 2 to 4 page Microsoft Word document, 12 point Times New Roman, double spaced. And it should fall within 2 to 4 pages. There should not be a situation where you have more than 4 pages. If you're going more than 4 pages, your summaries may be too long, or you may be giving too much information. Remember that this is supposed to be brief and concise, so the 2 to 4 page limit is pretty easy to reach. Finally, you should always be looking at the rubric to be able to understand ahead of time how your work is going to be assessed. First of all, relevant sources. List 3 relevant sources to support the essay. Well, I'm going to be looking to make sure you have 3, that one of them is from the project resources document and that the other 2 are from library research. Bias sources describes the impact of using bias sources to support the topic. Again, I'm going to be looking at the 3 entries, 1 for each of your sources, and how you discuss bias in each of those sources. Same with diverse perspectives. I'm going to be making sure that you've discussed diverse perspectives for each of your 3 sources. And then support describes how each source supports the topic in terms of credibility and relevance. Finally, is it clearly communicated? That does have to do with organization as well as use of complete sentences and being able to use that template to help you organize. And then finally, citations and attributions. Basically, citations is another word for attributions. It uses citations for ideas requiring attribution with consistent minor errors. So we're not expecting it yet to be 100% correct, but we're moving in that direction. And so you need to demonstrate that you understand the need for citation and what kind of citation is being used in this collection of sources. And then as we move forward each time, we're going to be changing our expectations toward becoming more and more correct with how you do the citations. It may be tempting to look at Module 3 and assume that, oh, we only have 1 assignment this week, so I don't have to work as hard. That's not really true. This is an important step in the research process. And it is important that you do the readings and use the template, provide everything that's asked for, fully analyze each of your sources and how they might be used in your upcoming draft in Module 5. Plan your time effectively this week. Make sure that, as I've suggested all along, that you're looking at both the module and the announcement early in the week so that you can do some time management. If you're somebody who maybe wants to replace one of their library source articles from the Module 2 discussion, then you'll definitely want to plan in some time to spend doing additional research in the library. Always remember that the librarians are more than happy to help in that research. Their contact information is available by clicking on Shapiro Library and then the library homepage. And in the top right corner, there is information on how to contact the librarians. You can chat with somebody 24/7. You can email directly. I don't think they use the phone anymore. They used to use the phone. There may still be, let's see, under Get Help. It doesn't look like they have a phone number anymore. But chat and email are great resources. That way you don't have to worry about not having a copy of what you've read. They do have a transcript of the chat, and the emails, you always have the record. So that's it for Module 3.